Hello, this is John Thackeray, speaking to you from France. I'm disappointed, of course, that I cannot be with you in person, but it's a great privilege to be part of this exciting conference on art and AI. 6 months ago, in a talk entitled Beyond Calculation about AI and sustainability, I asked whether artificial intelligence could be enough on its own to drive the ecological transition we so desperately need. My key point then: a just transition will happen when we see nature differently, relate to nature differently, and understand the purpose of development differently. That's a big challenge. Transformation on that scale can seem unimaginable from the perspective of today. So, can AI change the way that we experience and understand the world? Can it help us stop treating the world as some kind of machine that we can control and realize instead that everything is connected in this living world and that we are part of that? Whether it's sub-microscopic viruses or mosses, mycorrhizae or trees, rivers and climate systems, modern science has confirmed an ancient wisdom. All natural phenomena are not only connected, their very essence is to be in relationship with other things, including us. This change in perception would have profound consequences for development. We would realize that ecological restoration is not just a remedial activity, like repairing the machine. We would think less about controlling nature and more about coexistence with nature in a spirit of reciprocity and kinship. The health of nature and the well-being of people would become a single story. So that's the question. Can AI foster new ways of knowing and being in the world as a medium of attention, as a medium of connection, and as a medium of relationship with the living world? Major AI projects are already underway that monitor the planet's ecosystems at multiple scales, such as planetary scale observation from many satellites of planet labs. The tools and connectivity are being deployed today to monitor the planet's vital signs in real time. These observational projects are not all top-down and satellite-based. Based in Switzerland, the Crowther Lab has launched an open data platform, Restore, that connects people everywhere to local restoration activities. Restore connects people to scientific data, supply chains, funding, and each other to increase the impact, scale, and sustainability of restoration efforts. These multi-scalar visualizations are undeniably striking. Add them all together, display them on a giant screen, and we get a wondrous picture of the planet's health, place by place, patch by patch. This global dashboard metaphor is tremendously attractive to business and policymakers, but it contains several dangers. The first is that the dashboard metaphor reinforces the illusion that nature is like a faulty machine that can be fixed. You could compare a planetary dashboard with intensive care in a modern hospital. The tubes and gadgets surrounding a sick patient are technical marvels of observation, but they tell us little about the reasons the patient got sick in the first place. Another problem with the dashboard metaphor: being top-down and outside-in, it excludes forms of knowledge and experience that cannot be represented in data and on screens. Its limited palette of data affords a diminished understanding of living systems in their unique contexts. The French philosopher Bruno Latour advocates that we move on from the blue marble perspective of Earth as seen from outer space by astronauts. In place of this familiar but distant image of a blue and green globe, we need to experience our places our life worlds in closer and more intimate ways. A redesign of Earth observation is already underway in what scientists refer to as the critical zone, a layer of the planet that stretches 2 or 3 kilometers in each direction above and below us. All the organisms and interactions important to life are found in this zone. To monitor its vitality, scientists have established critical zone observatories throughout the world, including this one in China. They use sensors and highly technical instruments to collect data in these outdoor laboratories. This work is Earth-based and involves research domains, as you can see in the box on the right: ecology, microbiology, geophysics, and so on. We're going to need help making sense of this complex interplay of data, and that's where AI could surely come in. I don't know how, but I'm describing an opportunity for AI here. Development and ecological restoration in this context are less about leaps of the imagination, more about connection. Connection with place, connection with each other, and above all, connection with the living. Ecological thinking is the ability to see the patterns of life as a connected whole. Designers and artists can use their creative skills to help us experience being part of nature, not outside. And the word experience, I believe, is key. I don't know how, but I'm certain that art and AI together can awaken the experience of interconnectedness. The children in this image have spent their morning on a farm. For them, this visit has been a gateway to nature connection. Experiencing the world as a web of connection between people, place, and nature has been forgotten in most of the West, and is hard to teach in the confines of a classroom or on a computer screen. These connections are best explored at the scale of the farms and bioregions that surround our cities. On a farm visit, one can learn firsthand that the health of the soil and the health of people are the same story. Soils, one discovers, are the most complex microbial ecosystem that we know. In healthy soils, an enormous range of partners interact and collaborate. Soils are a fantastic example of kinship amongst all of life in practice. A single teaspoon of healthy soil, it turns out, may contain thousands of species, 1 billion individuals, and 100 meters of fungal networks, nature's internet. These hidden life worlds are invisible not only to satellites, but also to most of us in the modern urban world. Unseen, they've also been uncared for until now. Now, thanks to the marvels of visualization, the hidden life worlds of soils are being brought into view. Julian Lieber, for example, studies the rhizosphere, the soil around the root of plants where microbial activity is especially high. Helped by AI, he tracks fungal hyphae, their rate of growth, how often they branch, and other metrics. The rhizosphere, as scientists describe the plant-root interface, is a superorganism in its own right. Another good indicator of soil health is the number and vitality of worms. Worm watching is popular with students, and this artist has now developed worm listening too. Combine low-tech citizen science with the analytical potential of machine learning, and observations from diverse sources and media can now be used to make diagnostic maps. Ecological restoration is a practice, not a promise, and it's happening everywhere, including in cities. Civic ecology, sometimes called ecological urbanism, weds the practice of city design and planning with the insights of ecology. It involves the interplay of multiple environmental disciplines, from climatology to psychology, much as we saw at critical zone observatories. In cities today, civic ecology is practiced in a large number of micro-interventions, as shown on this list. I won't go through them in detail, but think of this as a civic ecology to-do list. Urban forests play vital roles in urban ecologies. They are a home to wildlife, space for recreation, and insurance against flooding. Trees manage carbon emissions, control water flow and air quality, and regulate temperature and energy usage. Planting and maintaining trees also creates jobs and livelihoods. But integrating trees in cities is more complex than most people realize. 50% of urban trees don't survive after 10 years of life, even though the benefits generated by those same trees increase until they are 50 or older. Trees AI is a new platform that helps city managers improve the way trees are planted and maintained in urban forests. The Trees AI platform helps city managers avoid damage to existing ecosystems when planting urban forests, how to prevent seedlings dying through neglect, how to balance the water needs of new trees with existing water flows, and so on. Platforms like Trees AI are not control systems. Urban forests cannot be automated. Man's internet and nature's internet enable beneficial coexistence, kinship, if you like, between different networks. At an even smaller scale than nature's internet, in fact invisible, microbes also play a key role in the function of ecosystems, inside cities and outside. They contribute to biodiversity, nutrient cycling, pollutant detoxification, and human health. Microbes play a crucial role in nature's food webs. They account for most of the biodiversity in urban settings. Here we encounter another profound change in priorities. For hundreds of years it has been a focus of city design and building design to keep nature, and especially microbes, out. Now our design task is to welcome beneficial bacteria back, to make them feel at home. The purpose of microbial infrastructures and urbanism is to enable kinship. Design for kinship with microbes has already started. It even has a name, Microbiome-Inspired Green Infrastructure, or MIGI. As described by Dr. Jake Robinson, MIGI is a nature-centric infrastructure designed to enhance life-promoting interactions between humans and environmental microbiomes, in the air, on plants, in soils, on buildings. The design task is to enable their healthy coexistence. Now, when I told Professor Lu Longqi about Jake Robinson's work on MIGI, he asked me, how would this work at a campus scale? The answer is that the Tongji University campus would be a great site for a variety of MIGI trials. We could test associations between microbiodiversity exposure and human health. We could measure the impact of different design interventions on the health of the elements. We could test the efficacy of different exposure routes between microbes and humans in a campus context. A tough design challenge nonetheless remains. If 99% of life is invisible, how do we design for that? The good news, once again, is that real-world examples already exist. People are working with bacteria in an environmental context today. This picture, for example, shows a lacto-fermentation kitchen in which foods are preserved using lactobacilli. This sake brewery is an especially good real-world example of people working mindfully with bacteria. Dr. Maya Hay, a researcher with the Future Organisms Project, has studied how brewers are tuned to the social, spatial and temporal scales of life within the brewhouse, including, especially, the microbes that remain invisible. Natural here means that they do not use lab-optimized strains of bacteria or yeast. The fermentation process relies exclusively on ambient and endogenous microbes. They do not add anything. Most of their practices are about skillfully tending an environment in ways that are conducive to transformation. These are mostly hands-on practices. The brewers engage with microbes interactively. If fermentation has taught me anything, says Dr. Hay, It's that microbial time has its own pacing. Rather than abide by a predetermined production schedule, the brewers utilize practices like call and response and work song to coordinate the fermentation process among human and microbial participants. Hay describes this as attunement, the ability to notice, apprehend, and connect with others in meaningful response. My provocation here? I don't know how, but I'm confident that AI can be an aid for attunement. On a much larger scale than that sake brewery, we are also designing with microbes in landscape restoration projects, for example, on lands damaged by mining operations. When mining sites are being rehabilitated back to their native ecosystems, eDNA metabarcoding now helps ecologists determine what insects, pollinators, and bacteria used to live there. Soil restoration of this kind is also happening in cities as a feature of the civic ecology I mentioned earlier. A lot of this work involves citizen volunteers working alongside ecologists and soil health experts, and eDNA can greatly enrich their work. The information revealed by eDNA analysis is extraordinary. What insects, pollinators, and bacteria used to live there? But deciding how to use this information in the context of ecological restoration, what should be planted there next or when, is complex. Once again, I don't know how AI can help with soil restoration, only that surely it can make a critical contribution. Now, while systems thinking is a relative novelty for most of us in the industrial world, sensitivity to ecological context is advanced among shepherds and other pastoralists who've lived on the land for generations. Small-scale herd owners, for example, have practiced forms of agricultural production on arduous dry lands for 6,000 years. The lands they work on are approximately home to 80% of the world's biodiversity. Indigenous peoples have a closer relationship with the ecologies of their land than those who practice production agriculture, let alone those who view landscapes through the window of a high-speed train. But the intimate, fine-grained knowledge of people with the capacity to work intimately on the land can always be enhanced. A project in India called Decentralizing Digital, or DEDI, explores the possible roles that tech might play in enhancing agroecology practices that are already successful. The palette of tools in DEDI, AI, machine learning, mesh networks, the Internet of Things, voice-enabled Internet. For example, these small-scale coffee growers in Karnataka, in rural southern India, have developed a holistic, whole-systemed approaches to their land over generations. They have developed a deep connection with the forest and preserve biodiversity and soil health as a daily practice, not an afterthought. The design brief in DEDI, how to enhance the farmer's ability to assess the health of their soil and their care for biodiversity. The deep experience of the farmers is a starting point, not an afterthought in DEDI. Farmers are part of the design process, as is the larger community of the village. Indigenous means having originated and being produced, growing, living or occurring naturally in a particular region or environment. This definition surely applies to ecological restoration as a whole, not only to small-scale coffee growers. Indigenous knowledges are not recipes as if for a cake. They cannot be extracted, printed on method cards and applied around the world at will. Indigenous knowledge is situated, place-specific, local and relational. It operates at multiple scales, from microbiome to bioregion. It is also shaped by multiple time scales, from geological time to the bacterial time of fermentation. To conclude, a new form of development is emerging in which we no longer think of the oceans, fields and forests as resources or solutions. We have started to engage with nature as a complex of constantly changing life worlds. We are learning how to experience the health of a place and the persons who inhabit it as a single story. Ecological restoration, at the heart of this new approach development, involves multiple interacting practices: science, art, social innovation, and design. AI, I believe, can be a medium of experience and learning that enables these practices to interact. Kinship, the work of reconnection with all of life, is not incompatible with innovation or scientific inquiry. On the contrary, scientific and indigenous knowledge can complement each other. They can expand the menu of what's possible, from eDNA analysis of damaged soils or AI that translates indigenous languages. In combination with other forms of knowledge, the true potential of AI is to help us reconnect with the living and the real. Thank you.